All right, guys, good evening to all of you. Thank you very much for joining the class. Well, tonight we have a lot of things to do. We have to, first of all, finalize the theoretical explanation of the listening section, and then we have to practice together, okay? So in order to finalize that and to do it on time, let us start immediately with our class. And let me please right now go to here, the presentation, and let us start, okay? Because we have a bunch of things to discuss together tonight. Well, let's go. Here I am. Great. Well, so yesterday we talked about 3 types of questions in the listening section, and here you have the 4th one. This one is called detailed question, okay? And detailed questions, by the way, dear students, are very much similar to a type of question you're going to find in the reading section. And of course, I know that with you, we have not discussed that yet, but don't worry, we're going to do it in the following weeks. And it's not necessary for you to know that in order to understand this question, okay? But what do? They deal with the specific facts from the listening section, but they are not usually as specific as the ones in the reading section, as I say. Well, let me explain this in simple words. For example, all of you are from South America, right? Or Central America. And in your universities, for example, or when you were in high school, what type of questions do you receive when you were taking an examination? I guess I can actually bet that you received this type of question. For example, the professor told you, okay, guys, tomorrow we're going to have an exam. Started from page 20 until page 30 of your book. And next day, you went to the exam, you received the paper, look at the question, and it said, according to page 25, who was Napoleon? And you had to respond. Napoleon was a general, was a singer, was a dancer, or was, I don't know, a politician. Who was him? And as I say, you have to study, right? Books and pages. And the basic questions in South America are basically, what did the textbook say about this, right? Or what did this page say about this? Are very simple questions, and they are detailed questions, basically, because they ask that type of information, like details. They ask, in page 23, we talked about Napoleon. So who was Napoleon according to page 23? And you respond, right? According to the options they give you. And that type of question is also here in the TOEFL exam. And this is that type of question. Detailed questions are the ones that we normally have in South America. Questions that ask, what did the passage say about this? And we respond, right? So in this type of questions, it's very simple to respond. You really have to, well, ask yourself the question, what did the lecture or conversation that you just listened to say about this, right? And now, very important here, detailed questions in the listening section rarely deal with very specific information like numbers or names. And this is because, of course, you know that the listening section presents you lectures and conversations to listen. And you have the opportunity or the chance to listen to all this material once. You don't get the chance to listen twice. Therefore, they know that if they ask you, for example, about a number or a particular date, let's say that it's a birth number, then let's say that in your lecture, they said that Napoleon was born, I don't know, on November 22nd, whatever. And if they said that, they are not going to ask you about that, of course, because it's super picky, right? Super, super demanding for you to remember that and to write it down. So never bother yourself to use your notes to memorize or to save for later numbers or names. Okay, numbers and names are things that rarely appear on questions in the listening section. The only exception to this rule, I'm telling you, would be that the lecture or the conversation constantly repeats a number or a name. For example, if they repeat, I don't know, for some reason, the Napoleon's birthday, like once and again, they said, when Napoleon was born on November 22nd, or in November 22, when Napoleon was born, and then they look for manners to repeat and repeat and repeat that number, that is some sort of suggestion they are giving you, at least in sort of sub-communication, that this particular piece of information is going to be relevant in the questions later on. So if you notice that a name or a particular number, could be a date, could be I don't know, a cipher, it could be I don't know, an indication, a coordinate. If it is mentioned once and again in a very repeated state, then you know, okay, I'm going to take note of this. But if you don't listen to that more than once, do not take it into your notes. Do not write it down, because it's simply a detail, it's a curiosity they are mentioning to make, of course, the lecture or the conversation richer, okay? But that is not something you should be worried about or concerned about, all right? But detailed questions, as I say, although they ask about factual information in the conversations or in the lectures, they ask about things that you could recognize very simply. by merely paying attention and internalizing the material you receive in these lectures and conversations. Okay, so please try to avoid this type of unnecessary notes because they are just, I would say they are just stressing, but they are not actually very much helpful. Okay, great. So in order to exemplify this, let me show you this. Okay, we listened yesterday to a conversation, you remember, of a student and a secretary, and the student went and complained, hey, yesterday I received this notice that says that I didn't pay my tuition, but I actually paid. And here it says that that if I do not pay, I'm going to be kicked out of classes because I'm going to be pending of payment. And the secretary says, okay, let me help you. She looks into her computer. She finds out that the student paid on a holiday week, and that's the reason why, weekend, excuse me, and that's the reason why the computer processed the payment, not a human being, and of course, the reason why all this issue came to exist. And she says, well, don't worry, dear student, we are going to have the chance to check this out by ourselves. Your payment is being processed now. You can be very much calm because you're going to be able to attend classes. And he says, oh, that's a great relief, right? Because he wanted to attend classes. So we did listen to this yesterday. I think it's not necessary for us to listen once again because we have this very much fresh in our mind. So in that case, for this conversation, a detailed question would be very simply, what problem does the student have? We listened to this conversation yesterday. As I say, it's this one when the student came to the office and said, I received this notice that says that I didn't pay, that I'm late, that I have not paid my tuition. When I did it, and it says that if I don't pay, I'm going to be banned from attending classes. Help me. And the secretary helps them, right? So what is the problem that this student presented? That is what the question is all about. In other words, it's asking you, what did the conversation say about the student's problem? As I say, the question is always that one. What did the conversation or what did the lecture say about this particular topic? And the only thing you do for responding this particular types of question is to remember or to consult your notes. If you have forgotten this detail, you consult your notes, you read again, and you respond. No more than that, okay? So in this case, which one would be the correct answer? It would be answer B. He received a notice that his payment was late. We discussed this. We listened to this yesterday. He said, hey, here my payment or my notice says that I didn't pay, that my payment is late. I have not paid, but I actually say that I did pay because I did it very recently, right? Help me. So this is the student's problem. He received a notice that his payment was late, all right? It cannot be A, he received another student's tuition statement because, for example, he never said something like, hey, I have a problem. Here in this notice that I just received, it says Charlie, but my actual name is Jack. I think it's confused, right? Something like that. Notice, he never said something like that, or he never said, hey, I don't know, I was called here to this office, but I'm not Jake, I'm Charles, right? Whatever. So A cannot be the correct answer. What about C? He forgot to pay tuition during a holiday week. Notice, the conversation said exactly the contrary. The problem originated because he paid during a holiday week. He paid during a weekend in which no staff from the university was working, and the computer processed the payment. And that was the source of this error and confusion. Okay, but this question, or excuse me, this sentence, this response is telling you he forgot to pay tuition during a holiday week. And it's actually the contrary. He paid during a holiday week, and that's the reason why all these problems and issues originated, right? So C is not the correct answer. What about D? He has been barred from attending classes. You remember yesterday, we discussed this together. We said, what was the main concern the student had? And we said, right, the main concern this student had was to be part of his classes. He wanted to attend his classes, right? We discussed that yesterday. So in the entire conversation, he was very, very much concerned and preoccupied. Hey, am I going to be able to attend classes? Could you help me? I don't want to be banned from attending classes, etc., etc. So in D, it's saying he has been. And notice that it's a factual thing, as if he had already been banned from attending classes. But in the conversation, that is not the scenario. The scenario in the conversation is that he was fearing he will be kicked out of classes. He was not banned from attending classes yet, but he was fearing, he was preoccupied he would be in the future. So notice that D is incorrect because it's talking about the issue as if it were part of the past and it had already happened, but it's not the case. in the conversation, he was afraid it could happen in the future, but not that it happened already in the past, right? So notice D is wrong. Although it seems to be right, when you read it 2 times, you notice, hey, this is wrong. So my recommendation, as I say, be very much apprehensive and careful when reading the responses, because a priori, they seem correct because they use vocabulary to confuse you. But when you re-examine them and you cast doubt upon them and you read them twice, 3 times, you know, okay, well, this is not true actually, right? So please never make the mistake to be convinced too quickly. Give yourself the right to doubt on any single one of these responses, okay? Any question, dear students, about this type of question? Anything that I could clarify here? Detailed questions? No? Questions? Lenny, Karim, Yvonne, Maya, Fla, questions about this?
No questions, teacher.
Okay, thank you very much. Great, and since that we don't have questions, then, oh, there's something I want to talk about here. I told you when we discussed the first part of the listening section that sometimes these multiple choice questions, because all of the questions are multiple choice we discussed, right? All of them ask you to choose one answer out of a set of possible answers. So never is going to be the case that you have to type your response. For example, a question that tells you, could you please write what the speaker one said to speaker two? That is never going to happen. Never. Okay. Every single time the questions ask you to choose one answer out of a possible set of responses. Okay. But sometimes responses are not, let's say, individual. You have to choose 2 answers or 3 or 4 answers instead. How can you know that? When the question doesn't tell you that you have to choose 2, 3, or 4 answers, then you can understand naturally, okay, and by default, let's say, that the question merely asks you to select one answer. But when the question tells you something like this, a sentence besides the question that tells, choose 2 answers, choose 3, choose 4 responses, then you know, okay, instead of choosing 1 response, I'm going to be able here in this case to choose 2. Because if you do not choose 2 answers, as I say, the response is not going to be complete. That question requires you to choose 2 answers, not just 1. Okay? So whenever you read this question, be very much careful to read it entirely, because sometimes besides the question or below the question, there are these letters or this sentence that says choose 2 answers, choose 2 answers, choose 3 responses, choose 4 even. So you have to be very much careful, okay? And make sure you read the entire question. Some people read part of the question and they go to respond directly. That is a mistake. A mistake would be to do so. The correct manner to approach every single question is to read questions carefully, because as I say, sometimes the question itself indicates to us besides or below that we have to choose more than 1 answer. But as I say, if the question doesn't tell you to choose more than 1 answer, then you can deduce that time and you can be sure that in that particular question, you have to choose 1. Okay, so how do you know when you have to choose more? The question tells you, choose 2, choose 3, choose 4. But when the question doesn't tell you anything, you just merely have to choose 1 answer. Okay, that's how you identify. The question tells you, when it is the case, to choose to choose 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 answers, whatever. But when the question doesn't tell you anything, it's just 1 response. Okay, you have to know that. Very good. Well, next type of question. This is the attitude question, okay? The attitude question. So what are attitude questions? First of all, I want to give you this illustration. It's very interesting. So imagine that I am, well, a doctor that I studied medicine, okay? I studied medicine because my parents decided to, to enroll me into a university that is very good for medicine. They are doctors as well, and they always wanted me to be a doctor. I studied medicine. I was never passionate about it. I never liked it, though I was very intelligent. And I studied, and I became one of the best doctors of the nation. Imagine that hypothetical case. So a university offers me to teach classes, to be a professor in its institution. So if that's the case, I'm going to go to that university. And maybe I'm going to go there to make my parents feel proud of me, or to gain money, to earn money. I don't know. And what happens if, for example, I teach a class and my students notice that I am a very good doctor. I know a lot about medicine, about anatomy. I've studied many books. I've made my research, etc., etc. I could teach a wonderful class, right? I could teach a fantastic class. I could teach them a lot of things about anatomy, about I don't know, uh, any other part of medicine. I'm not very much familiarized with it, but maybe I don't like medicine, right? As I told you, because I studied medicine for the only and simple reason to make my parents feel proud of me. If that is the case, my classes are never going to be passionate, right? My classes are going to be delivered in a very, very much reluctant mood. For example, if I'm teaching them, I don't know, about bones, I'm going to take a bone, I'm going to say, right, well, here you have a bone, and as you can see, it has this tissue. You can differentiate between this bone and superior bones and inferior bones. And probably I'm going to be, I don't know, very much unpassionate and undisposed to talk to all these things. And if somebody asks me a question, I'm going to say, yeah, you know, look for yourself. I don't know. I don't care, right? If I'm not passionate about what I do, because I don't like medicine, but anyways, I'm a great teacher. So by the way the professor behaves towards the subject, you can know his personal attitude towards it. And this is the reason why I brought all the story to the table, because I want you to differentiate that sometimes the professor teaches something, but that doesn't represent, yes or yes, his actual perspective, his personal perspective on the issue. Maybe I teach you a class about biology, Darwin's evolutionary theory, and I do not find that theory to be convincing, and I consider it to be flawed and whatever. But anyways, I teach you a very good class about it. But if I teach it in a very, very much, as I say, reluctant mood, it's because I do not like it, right? Or I do not want to be there. Or for example, if I use some terminology to make very, very much, let's say, I don't know, offensive commentaries against that theory. If I say, well, tonight we're going to discuss the absurd and preposterous topic of Darwin evolutionary theory. What could you infer? What could you know about my opinion on Darwin's evolutionary theory? Of course, that I don't like it. Maybe I find it to be, I don't know, unconclusive. Maybe I find it to be uncompelling, whatever. But the point is that by my word choice, you notice what my personal opinion on the subject is. And all this is I'm telling you because I want you to understand that what you teach with your personal perspective on the issue is different, okay? And you can notice what the personal perspective or opinion of somebody is with regard to that topic by paying attention to two different things. First of all, the intonation he uses to talk about one topic, and secondly, his word choice. Okay, you notice that very quickly and very rapidly. The intonation, the animus he has when talking about that part, talking about that issue, and secondly, the word choice. If he if he relates to that topic in a very, as I say, offensive manner, as if we were trying to show contempt in a very contemptuous manner, then you know, okay, this person doesn't like that topic, right? So in this type of question, it's exactly the same. They ask us to identify the professor's attitude towards the subject, not what they are teaching, but what they personally believe, all right? So in this case, I want us to listen once again to this lecture together on Botticelli, okay? And by listening to this, I want you to pay attention to the word choice the professor uses. And trust me, by paying attention to that, you're going to be able to notice what his personal opinion on the subject is. In this case, intonation is not very much relevant. And that is important because you can pay attention to both areas, but not every single time both aspects are going to tell you and reveal what personal opinion the professor has. Sometimes just one of them reveals such a thing. But the point is that if you pay attention to both areas, to both the spheres, the word choice and also the intonation, the passion he offers in that particular subject, you can know something about the personal opinion this person has, okay? So let's listen once again and try to pay attention to those two criteria, okay?
How many of you have heard of Alessandro Di Mariano di Vanni Filippelli? No? Nobody? Well, let me put it this way. How many of you are familiar with the work of an artist called Sandro Botticelli? Or just Botticelli? Yeah, that's what I thought. It's definitely an easier name to remember. But a lot of you might also be surprised to learn that his work fell out of favor from shortly after the Renaissance until the late 19th century. That's right. It's really only within the past 150 years that Botticelli's work has returned to popularity, and yet, within that time, his name, well, his alias, has become synonymous with the kind of grace and beauty that characterizes the best of Renaissance painting. Patronized by the famous Medici family, Botticelli's work was celebrated during his lifetime for some of these same qualities. While his earliest works often used religious subject matter, well, we've seen this throughout the course, haven't we? How common this was. These are not the works that are most celebrated today. In fact, let me ask you, what are the paintings that you most associate with Botticelli? Well, The Birth of Venus is definitely one of Botticelli's better known works. His masterpiece, Primavera, which was painted 3 years earlier, was done in the same vein. Primavera means spring in Italian, and here's a slide of the painting just here. These are works that didn't rely entirely on the iconography of the Catholic Church. Well, we do see some holdovers from Botticelli's earliest work. The main subjects of these paintings go back to earlier traditions of gods and goddesses. Note the extensive use of nature as a metaphor, in addition to the nudity of some of these figures, or the skimpy clothes used to cover them. Actually, however, Botticelli was extremely religious and would end up painting work for churches and cathedrals using Catholic iconography for the rest of his life. The Madonna and Child, for example.
Okay, I'm going to stop the lecture here because first of all, we have listened to this one. And also because I think that until this point, you have managed to listen the relevant portion to identify the professor's opinion, as I say, or personal attitude on this subject, okay? So let us go to the question. Remember, in this type of question, we are not talking about what the professor taught on the subject, but his personal opinion. And this particular area can be identified, as I say, by two criteria. First of all, the intonation, and secondly, the word choice he uses, okay? So notice, what is the professor's attitude towards Botticelli? And here we have four options. He enjoys some of his work, but not all of it. He believes people will hardly recognize him by his true name. See, he believes his career teaches us about religious structures, or he considers his work has no actual relevance in our history. So which one is the correct answer in this case? Remember, your objective in this question is to deduce what type of personal position or opinion does the speaker have with relation to one specific topic. This position or opinion will come up to you very clearly by paying attention to the wording he's using and or the intonation he uses. Remember, not every single time both aspects are going to tell you something. Sometimes just one of them is going to reveal to you the personal attitude of the professor. Sometimes both of them, okay? But as I say, you have to pay attention to both in order to catch one, okay? At least, and with that, you can respond the question. So remember, in this case, which one is the correct answer? The answer in this opportunity for this question, it's B. He believes people would hardly recognize him by his true name. And this you can know it because at the very beginning of the lecture, the professor was asking his students, do you know who is Mariano Filippepi? And nobody answered, right? And he said, well, what if I tell you Botticelli? And well, everybody said, yeah, of course. And he said, yeah, that's what I thought. By that mere sentence, that's what I thought. Then you know the professor's attitude on the question, attitude on this particular subject. He believed Botticelli was not very much easily recognizable by his true name, right? He believes people would hardly recognize him by his true name. Notice that this is very much simple to notice, right? When you pay attention to this word, because that sentence, well, yeah, that's what I thought, tells you a lot about the professor, tells you that on his mind, he was trying to make some sort of experiment with his students, right? Trying to figure out if they could recognize Botticelli by his actual name instead of his artistic name. And as nobody did it, but when he said Botticelli, everybody recognized this very much famous artist. He confirmed his theory and he said, yeah, that's what I thought, right? So he believes people would hardly recognize him by his true name. That is the correct answer. Now, what about A? He enjoys some of his work, but not all of it. This is not true because the professor never referred to Botticelli's work with a very contemptuous manner. He never said, for example, Yeah, like Botticelli, well, the birth of Venus, not very much interesting, but let us discuss it, right? He never said something like that, never used a contemptuous or reluctant intonation, so you cannot know if he enjoys or dislikes some of it, right? Some of the work painted by Botticelli. What about C? He believes his career teaches us about religious structures, not whatsoever, because the professor never said if he considered Botticelli to be relevant in his religious uh, topic or something, or in his religious apprehension. The only thing he said is that he was religious, yes, but he never said if he depicted or portrayed his religious animosity on his work, right? He never said such a thing. So we cannot say that he believed Botticelli depicted his religious attitude on his painting, right? So we cannot say that. What about D? He considers his work has no actual relevance in our history. Once again, this is the opposite to what the lecturer said, because at the end of the lecture, the professor says and accepts, right, and basically recognizes, yeah, Botticelli shows us that if you're not recognized today, you can be recognized and to be one of the most recognized and relevant artists in the world, because nowadays, and since that time when Botticelli became famous, more books have been written about him than any other artist in the world, right? So notice, he is acknowledging that Botticelli was indeed very much relevant to art history, right? So that's how you respond to this type of question. Two aspects, intonation and word choice. Be very much apprehensive in this type of questions. You have to pay attention to every single word, because one word can reveal to you the personal opinion of somebody on any subject. Any question to your students about this questioning, any consult? Questions? Lenny, Karen, John, Lucia, Fla?
Yes, teacher. So in this paragraph, we can say that the key word is when the professor talked about the first name. I forgot the name, about the original name of this painter, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. When he said, have you ever heard about Mariano Filippetti? Right. That's what he said. And then he said, like, nobody knew it. And he said, what if I tell you about Shelley? And apparently everybody said, yeah, of course we know him. And he said, yeah, that's what I thought. Right. Like, that was my thought. I knew that you would recognize him by his artistic name, but not for his real name. So then we can deduce and we can understand that personally, the professor considered that it's very hard to recognize Botticelli by his true name. Yeah, is that fine?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, my pleasure. Any other question, dear students, about this type of questioning? Okay, let's go to the last type of question, and then we're going to practice, okay? This is called categorizing questions. Categorizing questions ask you to sort key items from the lecture according to certain criteria. Some of the answers will usually be stated, whereas others will be implied, and the categories may differ from the most obvious ones mentioned in the lecture. Let's take a look at an example. Let me show you this. It's very simple to understand, okay? And in order to do so, we're going to listen to a complete new lecture, okay? So you need to pay attention to this one. You have your notes there, please take them. And then we're going to use this one to talk about this type of question. Let's go.
Listen to part of a lecture in a world history class.
In any introductory course, I think it's always a good idea to step back and ask ourselves, what are we studying in this class, and why are we studying it? So, for example, when you looked at the title of this course in the catalog, Introduction to World History, what did you think you were getting into? What made you sign up for it? Besides filling the social science requirement. Anyone?
Well, just the history of everything, like starting at the beginning with, I guess, the Greeks and Romans, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, that kind of stuff. Like what we did in high school.
Okay. Now what you're describing is one approach to world history. In fact, there are several approaches. Basic models or conceptual frameworks of what we study when we do history. And what you studied in high school, what I call the Western Heritage Model, This used to be the most common approach in U.S. high schools and colleges. In fact, it's the model I learned with when I was growing up back, about 100 years ago, at Middletown High School up in Maine. I guess it made sense to my teachers back then, since, well, the history of Western Europe was the cultural heritage of everyone in my class. And this remained the dominant approach in most U.S. schools till, maybe 30, 40 years ago. But it doesn't take more than a quick look around campus, even just this classroom today, to see that the student body in the U.S. is much more diverse than my little class in Middletown High. And this Western heritage model was eventually replaced by, or sometimes combined with, one or more of the newer approaches. And I want to take a minute to describe these to you today, so you can see where this course fits in. Okay, so up until the mid-20th century, the basic purpose of most world history courses was to learn about a set of values, institutions, ideas, which were considered the heritage of the people of Europe. Things like democracy, legal systems, types of social organization, artistic achievements. Now, as I said, this model gives us a rather limited view of history. So in the 1960s and 70s, it was combined with or replaced by what I call the different cultures model. The 60s were a period in which people were demanding more relevance in the curriculum, and there was criticism of the European focus that you were likely to find in all the academic disciplines. For the most part, the different cultures model didn't challenge the basic assumptions of the Western heritage model. What it did was insist on representing other civilizations and cultural categories in addition to those of Western Europe. In other words, the heritage of all people, not just what goes back to the Greeks and Romans, but also the origins of African, Asian, Native American civilizations. Though more inclusive, it's still basically a heritage model, which brings us to a third approach, what I call the patterns of change model. Like the different cultures model, this model presents a wide cultural perspective. But with this model, we're no longer limited by notions of fixed cultural or geographical boundaries. So then, studying world history is not so much a question of how a particular nation or ethnic group developed, but rather it's a look at common themes, conflicts, trends that cut across modern-day borders of nations or ethnic groups. In my opinion, this is the best way of studying history, to better understand current-day trends and conflicts. For example, let's take the study of the Islamic world. Well, when I first learned about Islamic civilization, it was from the perspective of Europeans. Now, with the patterns of change model, we're looking at the past through a wider lens. So we would be more interested, say, in how interactions with Islamic civilization, the religion, art, literature, affected cultures in Africa, India, Spain, and so on. Or let's take another example. Instead of looking at each cultural group as having a separate, linear development from some ancient origin, in this course, we'll be looking for the common themes that go beyond cultural or regional distinctions. So, instead of studying a particular succession of British kings or a dynasty of Chinese emperors, in this course, we'll be looking at the broader concepts of monarchy, imperialism, and political transformation.
There you are. Well, fantastic. So we listened to this lecture on history in this case, and I think it was very interesting, right? Now, with this lecture, I want to exemplify to you the categorizing question, okay? So as you can see here in the categorizing question, we're going to use a little bit different methodology to respond to questions. Look at my screen. The question says, match each of the topics below with the type of word history occurs in which it would most likely be discussed. And in this case, it says write your answer, but it's just because, well, this is a simulation, right? On the exam, as I told you, you never write anything. But how do you respond this? Notice you have the sentences below. And as you can see, you have these boxes here. Each of these boxes contains a title. And I want you to think about that title as if it were a category, okay? It's a category, basically. As you can see, our categories in this case are the three types of historical approach and methodology we listened to in the lecture: the Western Heritage Model, the Different Cultures Model, and the Patterns of Change Model. The three categories and the three types of history approach we discussed in the lecture. And below that, we have three sentences. And each of them is some sort of sentence that has a relationship with one of these categories. So every single time you respond to this question, the only thing you have to do is to read the three of these categories, to read the three, or of course, the three of these sentences, and to drag, arrastrar, with your mouse, right? Within the reply box, the sentence that corresponds to that category. In this case, you don't have to choose, you don't have to click on the response. You drag, se arrastra. You drag within the reply box with your mouse, of course, doing this movement, right? Click, you click and you drag, and you let it fall down within the category. Flip, flip. Now, notice, each sentence, as I say, corresponds to one of these categories. What about A? The contributions of Native American art to the US culture. Notice this sentence has a relationship with what? With the second type of historical approach, our second category, the Different Cultures Model. Because we listen in that model of historical investigation that history doesn't look for understanding a particular group of people or dynasty or empire. Instead of that, it looks for different connections among a very much varied group of people, let's say villages or civilizations. It is some sort of multicultural approach, right? That's the reason why it is called Different Cultures Model. So as you can see, the first statement that talks about the contributions of the Native American people to the art of the United States culture is a very good example of that category, because it's talking about two different peoples. First of all, the Native Americans of the US and the settlers of the US, right? Because you know that in the US, people came from Great Britain, right? Running away from monarchy. They established there, they settled there, and they found out that there were people already living in America, the Native American people, that they call them, right? And they will, of course, interacted, they had wars, etc. So the contributions of the Native Americans to the art of the US will be something that you would study in this type of approach, the Different Cultures Model, because you're discussing two different cultures, not just the US, but the Native Americans too. So you would take the sentence and you would drag it within that category, because as you can see, there's a relationship between this category and this first statement, right? What it will be? The independent discovery of printing techniques in Asia and Europe, okay? Notice that this B, independent discovery of printing techniques in Asia and Europe, pertains to the third category, the patterns of change model. Because in this category, the professor said, we look at history and we are looking for particular activities, discoveries, and phenomena, and how people of different places reacted to the same phenomena, to the same discovery, to the same explosion, whatever. They react to, or these people react to the same thing in their own way. And that's what this category is all about. The independent discovery of printing techniques in Asia and Europe discusses that, because it's telling us, you know, we are going to discuss how Asians and how Europeans reacted to the same thing, the discovery and the invention of printing. So notice that this is part of the third category, the patterns of change model, right? And C, so you have to take this B answer and you have to drag it, arrastrarla, within the reply box, within the third one. And C, of course, the last one, you will have to drag within A. Why? Because ancient Roman foundations of the US legal system is by definition part of the Western heritage model, because when we talked about the Western civilization, all we mean is the Romans, the Greeks, how all this very ancient civilization founded a lot of principles that we utilize in contemporary society, right? The understanding of justice, civil rights, the understanding of taxes, economic systems, societal systems, etc., etc. All of that we have derived from the Greeks, from the Romans. So how the Romans helped the US legal system is part of what you would learn in the Western Heritage Model history course, right? So you take the sentence and you drag it within the first category. And this works for every single one of the lectures you're going to listen. Of course, the categories are going to be different, the sentences are going to be different, but as I say, the thing is to look for a sentence that matches the category that we have in the box. And we find a relationship, okay, when we find a relationship between them, very easy, that's it. We have just clicked, right? We know what to do. Because what do we know? We have to drag it within the reply box because there is a relationship between them. Any question, dear students, any consult about this type of question? Doubts, consults? No questions? Okay,
I think
no
there's
question.
no question, teacher, but
Mhm.
well, for my own, I think this kind of question maybe are the most difficult or tricky for me
Okay,
because I understand really very well, and it's a long listening tape. So, well, maybe a little difficult.
Mhm. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Don't worry. I think that you're right. It's a very difficult question. But trust me, you're going to get better. Actually, today I have a gift for all of you. I'm going to send at the end of the class a bunch of material for you to practice in your free time that is free. And with that, you're going to practice every single time, right? Like tomorrow, in your free time, this weekend, etc. And by listening and listening and listening more, you get better. Okay, so don't worry about that. It's just a matter of practice in this case. Listening is just practice. Okay, so now I want you to practice with me tonight. Okay, and for that reason, you're going to have a chance now to listen an actual lecture from the simulator, and you're going to respond them, okay, to the questions. So please prepare yourself because we are about to practice the listening section. In this case, we're going to practice with a conversation instead of a lecture because of our time limits right now. But tomorrow, the entire class is going to be for practicing because we have finalized with the theoretical part, and it's time for us to practice, okay? So here I have the conversation, and well, let's go and listen to it, okay? And after we listen, we're going to be responding the 5 questions that, of course, correspond to this conversation, okay? So take your notes, listen, because you're going to respond these questions by yourself. I'm not going to do it, okay? So let's go.
Listen to a conversation between a student and an administrator at the university's finance office.
Hi there. Can I help you?
I really hope you can. I'm worried I'll,
Oh, this is the one that we have.
I'm
Don't worry. Let's go to another one. Okay. Sorry, I have to go question by question until we finalize. Okay. No. Fourth one. Okay. No. Let's go with this one, okay? Listen.
Listen to a conversation between a student and her professor.
Hi, Hannah. How's it going? Did you have a question?
Yeah, actually I do. I was hoping that I could ask you for some guidance in preparing for my presentation on Friday. My topic is, well, the title I wrote at first was The Social Consequences of Economic Inequality in Contemporary America. I don't think I'll stick with that title, though.
Sure, I'd be happy to help. That topic is pretty big. Then again, I'll admit that the assignment itself was a bit broad. I could see it becoming overwhelming. But tell me a little bit more about what it is in particular that you're struggling with.
You're right that the topic is really broad. So right now, I'm thinking about sort of focusing on the disparity in mental health treatment by what economic class patients are from. People usually say that the poor get much worse treatment, but there's one situation when it's actually the upper class that's worse off.
Go on.
Like, don't get me wrong, the wealthy get very good treatment, much better treatment than people with less money, usually. I mean, they're able to pay the best doctors out of pocket. But because they're paying directly, I think those patients expect therapists to make them happy. and not to tell them unpleasant things, even if they're necessary.
I have to say, that seems like a very interesting and complex topic. I can understand why you're looking for help.
Yeah, maybe it's too complex?
That could be, but, you don't have to tackle the whole issue at once. A short overview of the specific case and its social implications might make for a more manageable presentation.
All right, that's fair. But still, I'm more worried about coming across the wrong way. How do I explain my point of view clearly? I'm afraid the whole class is going to disagree with what I have to say.
Well, it's true that some people will disagree with you. I don't think there's any avoiding that. But I think that that's exactly why you should use that topic. It's important to have dialogue, to discuss all possible sides of an issue. Again, my first advice would be to focus on specific examples, the facts.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I guess I've been thinking about it in general terms, so I wasn't sure exactly what I would say. Like, how could I convince someone that a wealthy person couldn't buy the best psychological care there is? You know?
Right. Students often get caught up in using general descriptions and making general statements, and the presentation can become, frankly, dull. But on the other hand, if you tell a story,
I
then
see what you're saying. Okay, so I interned at a prestigious mental health clinic last summer, and I remember one young patient who had a lot of difficulty keeping close relationships, but she didn't see her own role in causing these problems. She saw everyone else as a problem. Her therapist, and he was this highly trained psychologist, he never challenged her, and I was disappointed in that. Do you think that'd work?
that sounds perfect. Use it, and be sure to include specifics and details.
Right, I will. Thanks for the advice.
All right, there you are. Well, let me explain how we're going to practice, okay? So here I have a chronometer, as you can see. And this one is programmed to emit a sound every single one of the 4 or 5 seconds that I have programmed in them. And as you can see, as the 4 or 5 seconds end, then the chronometer is going to emit the sound. And then you'll know that your time is over because, as we talked about, the listening section presents you a limited time for responding each of these questions. And that time is not accumulated. That is to say, if in this question you, for example, respond in 10 seconds because you found it very easy, and you want to use the remaining 35 seconds in the next question, you cannot do so because, as I say, they are not accumulating anything. It's 45 seconds per question without mattering if you use them entirely or not. Okay, so if you respond faster than this, fantastic, it's okay. But if you respond and use the 45 seconds, it's totally fine as well. You can use them entirely if you want and wish, okay? So one by one, you're gonna be saying your responses publicly, okay? You're going to reveal your responses. But all of you, please take notes of your responses, grab a piece of paper, and for each question, write which response would you have chosen. As I say, one of you, one by one, is gonna say what response he chose publicly, but all of you at every single time must write your responses on paper so that at the end we compare, okay? So let's go. This first question, I'm gonna choose a random student. Lenny, you're gonna help me with this one, okay? So you're gonna reveal your response publicly, but when the 45 seconds are over or when you are ready to respond, okay? So you can, all of you, are gonna start reading and responding this question, the first one.
Okay, can I choose?
Yes, of course.
Okay, the last one. The title of your presentation does not match the topic that you plans to speak about.
Okay, great, very good. Let's go with another question. This one is going to be responded by, in this case, Lucia. You're gonna help me with this one, okay? Okay, you go.
Okay, teacher.
Okay, tell me.
D. I'm not so sure.
Okay.
No.
Those are the 4 or 5 seconds, by the way. Okay, very good. You did it on time. Great. So D, great. Let's go to the next question. I'm going to reboot this. In this case, Karen, you go with the next one. Okay, let's go.
I think that the teacher.
Right. Thank you very much. Let's go. Next question. This one goes to Yvonne. Okay, dear Yvonne, this one is yours. Go.
The first one?
Right. Thank you very much. And let's go with the last question. I know there's somebody I think that is not going to respond, but doesn't matter. Maya, this one goes for you. Okay.
I think the answer is C.
Okay, there you are, just on time. Very good. See. Great. Well, so I think that in this case, Flavia didn't respond. Okay, dear Flavia, don't worry. There are no more questions for this exercise, but tomorrow the entire class is going to be for responding. But I know that you took your notes, of course, by yourself. So please, all of you, check the responses. We're going to comment on them. Don't worry. We're going to see. All right. All right. Good. Okay, great. So let's go. Let's review these questions. So why does the student visit the professor? In this case, the correct answer was she's uncertain how to best make a controversial point to her classmates, right? In this case, we chose the title of her presentation does not match the topic that she plans to speak about. Well, it's okay, don't worry. We are practicing, and that's the idea, right? To fail at this point so that we can, of course, improve our criteria and to manage to get a perfect qualification, right? It's totally fine. So E in this case, why is A the correct response? She's uncertain how to best make a controversial point to her classmates. This is the correct answer because you remember the student goes to this professor and says, you know, I need guidance because I have this topic that is very large, very complex, and I don't know how to really approach this one. And the professor himself recognizes, right? Yeah, I know that when I gave you the assignment, I knew it would be overwhelming to you because it's a very broad topic. And when the professor says this, he also says it's very controversial as well, right? And they actually discuss, I'm not sure if my peers are going to agree with me. And this could be actually very much controversial and start a discussion. And the professor says, yeah, but that's fine. If your peers disagree with you and there is a discussion, that's good because it's healthy. It's good for listening to different opinions, etc. So, you know, all those hints, let's say, could give you the idea that why does she go to that place? It was because she was uncertain how to best make a controversial point to her classmates, right? It's not because what the student says about the title is that the title is too long, right? Because she says, I actually think that the title is too broad too, because she says that this topic, she received the results of this imparity that exists between some classes in the US. It's very much broad. It's difficult to know how to approach it because there are a lot of topics and points in this matter, right? So she says, you know, actually my title is very much broad too. So in this case, it's not that the title doesn't match the topic as such, but that it's too broad, too large. It doesn't actually approach anything. It's too general, right? And that's what the professor admits. Yeah, it's too general. And I knew that it would be too general because I I knew this topic is difficult and overwhelming, right? So that's the reason why this is the correct answer in this case, A. Okay, but don't worry, it's very good anyways. Next question. According to the professor, why might the presentation be overwhelming for some students? This is what I was talking about. The assignment he gave did not provide much specific direction. And here he chose expressing general opinions can prove boring for those listening. Well, this is, it's not expressed in the conversation because, well, they never said that the students shouldn't talk about this in a general aspect or in a general manner because it could make others bored. What they said is that it could provoke discussion, right? So that this is not the correct answer. But B, it is, right? Because the assignment he gave did not provide much specific direction. And he admits this, right? When he said, when I gave you the assignment, I knew it was too broad and it could be overwhelming. He admits it. You remember that? When the professor said that, I knew it would be so overwhelming and broad that you had problems with this. But you have to, in this case, talk about some specific examples and you can approach it by parts, right? Not talking about everything, but a particular example, etc. Right? So in this case, yeah, the assignment he gave did not provide much specific direction, and that's how you know it because he said that he admitted this was the case. Okay. Next question, number 3. What does the professor believe that the student should present a viewpoint that other students might disagree with? This is also what I was commenting on. To promote healthy discussion on multiple points of view. Excuse me. The student says this, right? That she was one of her concerns. She said, I think that if I talked about this, many of my peers could disagree with me because it's a very much difficult topic to address with others. And he says, yeah, but that's fine. Actually, I did this as well because I knew that it provoked this type of discussion and that is healthy and fine for the class, listen to different points of view, etc. So this one is a very good response and it's the correct one. Okay. What about 4th one? What does the professor imply about using a specific example? A story will help capture the attention of the audience. Yes, it was true. Because he said that, right? Given that this is super broad, some people are not going to be caught right after you say the topic. So if you mention a story, everybody is going to listen to you because that is interesting, is consuming, etc. Right? So story will help capture the attention of the audience. The professor said so. So this is the correct answer. Very good. And we have the final question. And you also got it pretty well. Why does the student mention the case of the patient at mental health hospital where she worked? And she did it, right? Because the professor was constantly throughout the conversation saying, you should look for a particular example. And the student said, yeah, I should. You should look for another instance. Yeah, I should. And at the end, the professor repeats that a 3rd time. And she remembers a particular case and she says, oh yeah, but I went to this hospital the other day and I had this experience with this girl who paid for a therapist, and the therapist didn't question her wrong assumption that everybody was guilty for her problems, etc. Right? So she said this to suggest a case that may provide a factual basis for her opinions because she asked to the professor, is this fine? And the professor says, yeah, perfect. Please make sure to talk to all this in your exposition. Well, and she says, yeah, thank you. So to suggest a case that may provide a factual basis for her opinions. Very good. Well, great. I think that all of you responded very well. All of you were excellent. And tomorrow we're going to practice the entire class, okay? We're not going to discuss anything. All of you are going to be the main characters tomorrow because you're just going to practice, okay? So before we go, let me send something, as I told you, to the WhatsApp group. I was preparing this this afternoon for you. These are free materials, okay? In order to practice for the listening section in your free time, I'm actually going to send 2. This one I prepared it once for a class that I was not able to attend, but I had the document there. So both of these materials are free, a bunch of websites and also YouTube channels where there are a lot of exercises to practice the listening section. So please make sure to download this and to practice, okay? By yourself in your free time. You're going to notice that all the things we have discussed do have an application and you're going to be understanding this by yourself, okay? So please use this to practice. Well, we're going to start the class here tonight. And please, before we go, let us please take the poll and also help me with your presence, okay? By saying, of course, present to your names in the list. Any commentaries and opinions, please, are very much welcomed. Well, let's start then with the list. Is here Richard Fernando? Okay, it's not Richard here. Could you please, your students, help me with one more poll? Every single one, once a week, we're going to fill 2 different polls, okay? Because, well, the company requires me so. So please help me with that one as well, all right? I thank you very much for your responses too. So is here Lenny Jimenez?
Yes, present teacher.
Thank you very much, Lenny. What about Yvonne Kana?
Present teacher.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. What about Maya Muriel?
Present teacher.
Thank you very much. What about Flavia Montaño?
Present teacher.
Thank you very much, Flavia. What about Karen Ginelli?
Present teacher.
Thank you very much, Karen. And finally, Lucia Sulema.
Present teacher.
Thank you very much, Lucia. Well, there you are. Thank you very much for your responses to the anonymous poll. See you next class, okay, to practice this together. Thank you very much for your presence. Have a wonderful night.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye.
See you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye. See you. See you. Thank you.